9 U.S. Presidents Assassinated by Globalists by Larry Engel. Hello folks, I am Larry Engel. This is Article 25 from the assassination of presidents in the early days. These presidents would be George Washington, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, James Monroe, and also the compromise of James Madison and President John Quincy Adams. And these assassinations were carried out by the globalists, the international bankers, in order to take over the credit and money of the nation. With the early presidents, we have a preponderance of evidence that the European banking cartel does always assassinate leaders who oppose their agenda. Their agenda is the takeover and control of the nation's money and credit. Yes, I said always. Repeat, they always murder. My observation is that medical doctors are an essential part of the assassination team and the assassination scenario. Sometimes doctors have been unwillingly forced to participate, and at other times they are true believers. That is, they are willing to assassinate the presidents and other leaders, and they are called Sayanim.
This banking cartel called themselves Jews, but worship the golden calf, secret societies and money. When the wonderful Jewish prophet Isaiah advised and warned the evil king Ahab not to sin against God, Ahab tried to kill him and called Isaiah anti-Jewish or anti-Semitic. The modern royal Ahab bankers assassinate our presidents.
Common records provided to us by well-financed insider historians who never mention the banking cartel's political power tell us that only 4 presidents were assassinated. These were the presidents who were shot. But this is not the whole story. Something important is missing from these history books. I make the incredible claim that 20 U.S. presidents were assassinated. However, even if you check almost any encyclopedia, you are provided with sufficient documentation to know that 3 of these presidential victims who were shot did not die of their bullet wounds, but were killed by their doctors. Whoops! Medical mistakes? I say no mistakes. I say intentional murder. The presidents who were shot were Lincoln, Garfield, and McKinley. In the case of Lincoln, he was killed by his doctors probing for the bullet. However, if he had recovered, unfortunately, because of the nature of his wound, he would have been very severely handicapped. The 4th president that was shot was JFK. His brains were thrown all over the limousine, and even his wife was observed climbing on the back of the limousine to retrieve pieces of his brain. Reports claim that the president's brain disappeared during the autopsy. So why would they make this claim? It's because they had set up a fall guy, Lee Harvey Oswald, who was shooting from the back. And the president was shot from the front by his limo driver, who was an Irish Protestant, a Methodist, who considered all Catholics to be his deadly enemy. The limo driver was an Irish Protestant. Irish Protestants and Irish Catholics fight. And that is why he was chosen to shoot the president in the throat from the front at very close range. Driver William Greer turned and fired a laser-sighted, totally silenced pistol over his right shoulder as he stopped the limousine in a prearranged, that is prearranged by saying at the city council, he stopped in the kill zone that was prearranged. This bullet entered the president's throat, moving from left to right, and blew out the brain and the right rear of his head. Even a rough line points from the right side of the president's head through the throat directly to the driver or the driver's seat area. The fall guy in this case, Lee Harvey Oswald, was supposed to be shooting from the back of the president. Therefore, the assassination conspirators knew beforehand, during the early planning stage, that the evidence of a shooting by the driver from the front had to be destroyed. The limo was driven to the hospital where doctors were waiting to destroy this evidence. And that is exactly what they did. The First Lady, sitting beside him, knew the president was dead. She said so. So you are to believe the emergency room doctors did not know the president was dead, with at least half his brain missing? As pre-planned, the doctors had to destroy the evidence of a front bullet wound in the president's throat. They did a medical procedure called a tracheotomy. And with this tracheotomy, they cut the small hole that was the bullet wound in the president's throat, concealing the evidence. And that allowed the Warren Commission to claim that Lee Harvey Oswald actually did the shooting. So this had to be pre-planned because they knew the driver was going to shoot Kennedy. It had to be pre-planned. They gave some lame excuse for performing this surgery on an obviously dead president. And under normal circumstances, this would be a ridiculous thing for doctors to do. But one doctor working in the emergency room that day, who said he had experience with bullet wounds in the past, stated he witnessed an entrance wound in the throat of the president before it was destroyed by the tracheotomy surgery. His live TV comments were never part of the Warren Commission report, but I saw it myself on live TV from Dallas. I saw the doctor say this. There was an entrance wound in the president's throat. Doctors destroyed this evidence. Therefore, you can conclude, if President Kennedy had not have been killed by the bullets that hit him, the doctors were waiting to finish him off. This was the case with 3 other presidents that were shot. They did not die from their bullet wounds. They were killed by their doctors. And you can verify this information in almost any encyclopedia. Now, something like this must have also happened to Lee Harvey Oswald, the Fall Guy shooter. It seems so obvious. And by the way, there was a picture of Oswald standing in the doorway of the Texas School Book Depository watching the president drive by, instead of lurking in a faked shooting perch. In an assassination, rifles are only used as a decoy. Victims are always shot at very, very close range, never from a distance, because there are too many variables and too much risk of failure with a long-range rifle shot. Besides, it doesn't really matter if the doctors are going to be the ones that actually finish him off. Therefore, I have made 2 points. 1. Leaders who oppose the banking cartel are assassinated. And 2, there are always doctors involved, even when the victim is shot, and not poisoned. Poison is their preferred method. This occurs because the European American banking cartel has a very weak and deceptive control over the nation's money and credit. Banks are very unpopular too. The second point is because doctors cannot be successfully prosecuted for manslaughter by the legal system. 3 of the first 5 U.S. presidents died on the 4th of July at the hands of their doctors, and Washington also was killed by his doctors. Shooting assassinations are primarily show and tell events. If you oppose us, they're saying, look, we can kill you and get away with it. We're going to control the money and the credit of a nation. If you get in our way, we'll take a whack at you and we'll kill you, and the justice system will not prosecute us because we control the Bar Association. Modern doctors report that George Washington did not die of natural causes. There are those who believe that he died because the state of the art of medicine in his day was very crude. But I must ask, did he oppose the agenda of the banking cartel that always assassinates their enemies? They must assassinate because these bankers have a very weak control, a criminal hold on other people's money and credit. This fact would make a great leader like George Washington an absolute certain target for assassination by the banking cartel. English author William Stewart has written a book called The Invisible College, which is a detailed and accurate report on the history of banking from 700 AD up to the present. He indicates that the Lombard bankers from Geneva, Switzerland conquered Europe by taking over the banking and the credit, by marrying into royal families and assuming titles of nobility. Baron Rothschild verifies this by his mere existence. So for further evidence, Benjamin Franklin tells us that the Revolutionary War was fought not against the British or the British people, as we are commonly told, by bought and compromised authors, but the Revolutionary War was fought against the bankers who had conquered Britain and would not allow the colonies to print their own money.
The refusal of King George III to allow the colonies to operate an honest money system, which freed the ordinary man from the clutches of the money manipulators, was probably the prime cause of the Revolutionary War.
This is a modern medical report by Dr. Vibble V. Vodakin, M.D. All information leads us to believe that the malady responsible for George Washington's death was an acute inflammatory edema of the larynx, an affliction which attacks the tissue lying beneath the mucous membrane. It is characterized by a painful swelling of the structures of the larynx and the adjacent tissues below and above, including the epiglottis, causing great difficulty as well as pain in swallowing. When the swelling involves the glottis, the narrow gateway to the lungs, it obstructs the entrance of air and threatens death by asphyxia, or actual suffocation. And when it appears in a violent form, as in this case, It is, we may assume, actuated by some virulent microorganism. In all probability the Streptococcus. This microorganism was easily and readily available to doctors of Washington's day from infection and gangrene. The modern American physician in all probability would execute Washington's certificate of death in the following manner: septic sore throat, probably of streptococcic origin, associated with acute edema of the larynx. The total quantity of blood removed from President Washington has been estimated by various historians and medical authorities to be from 5 to 7 pints. The total quantity of blood taken amounted to from 124 to 126 ounces, or 3.75 liters, drawn over a period of 9 to 10 hours on Saturday, December 14, 1799. General Washington was a physically impressive man measuring 6 feet 3 inches in height and weighing 230 pounds. Because adult blood volume is 70 milliliter per kilogram, one can estimate the blood volume of President Washington at 7 liters. The extraction of more than half of his blood volume within a short period of time inevitably led to preterminal anemia, hypovolemia, and hypotension. The fact that General Washington stopped struggling and appeared physically calm shortly before his death may have been due to profound hypotension and shock. From the Encyclopedia.
George Washington's wife, Martha Washington, observing the doctor, she was a witness, and she specifically stated, oh, please don't take too much blood. You're taking too much blood. She was a witness. She was right there. And she knew the doctors were taking too much blood.
Blood removed from President Washington by his doctors. 1. 12 to 14 ounces by Mr. Alban Rollins. 2. 20 ounces by Dr. James Crabb. 3. 20 more ounces by Dr. James Crabb. 4. Then another 40 more ounces by Dr. James Crabb. 5. Finally an additional 32 ounces by Dr. Elisha Cullen Dick.
The most likely assassins of President Washington were Dr. James Crabb and Dr. Elisha Cullen Dick. Both men would have been approached and likely threatened by foreign agents and who gave them then orders to assassinate Washington. What evidence supports this? Dr. Dick was one of the high-ranking founders of Freemasonry in Alexandria, Virginia, where the president's home was, and this doctor had a history of dealing with the British military. The Masons are the blind obedience foot soldiers of the banking cartel. The other doctor, Dr. James Crabb, was Physician General of the United States Army. And that was the title that was given to the Surgeon General today. However, he was born in Scotland and first served as an officer in the British Army. These two doctors killed Washington. Or do you believe Washington's death was a chance event? Or maybe a medical error? Had President Washington lived, he would have played a major role in this country from protecting the nation from the insane, inhumane banking cartel. So they removed him. Of the first 5 presidents of the United States, 3 died on the 4th of July. Those 3 were murdered by their doctors. Even though they were old and not maybe in the best of health, it was important to the globalists that they die on a certain day, the 4th of July, while everyone was celebrating the Declaration of Independence. This was important to them because they wanted to send a malevolent message. And this, of course, was ordered. The doctors were ordered by the European banking cartel. They were the ones that wanted the power. They were the ones that were interested in the power. The European banking cartel. Do you believe that this 4th of July date, is just a coincidence? How can it be just a coincidence? 3 presidents out of 5 die on the 4th of July? That can't be a coincidence. So would you join me in believing that the bankers intended to kill these presidents? And in killing these presidents, they sent a malevolent message on the 4th of July to the rest of the leaders and representatives in our government. If you oppose us taking over your credit and money, we'll kill you. These 3 early presidents of the first 5 presidents were murdered by their doctors. I have found it hard to nail down actus reus in these 3 deaths. But I know from my research that murder is definitely in the cards. The victims were old and not in the best of health at the time of their deaths. But that does not rule out by itself assassination. Particularly if a message was to be sent intentionally that was directed at active national leaders who might oppose the banking cartel's agenda. Assassination is how the banking cartel always solves this problem. Politically correct historians would likely scoff and say, I have no proof of murder. However, probability mathematicians with their calculations would verify that science would deny the possibility that 3 deaths occurred on the 4th of July among the first 5 presidents. The mathematical chance that this would occur is astronomical. The many observations in this video series demonstrates that the deaths of these 3 presidents precisely fits the insane and inhumane serial killer pattern of the family dynasties who manipulate the world's money and credit. Even though in these deaths from the early days of our country, I find that direct evidence has faded with time, yet circumstantial evidence is still there and right in our faces. About only 6 months after assuming the office of president, the 6th president, John Quincy Adams, the son of John Adams, was faced with the circumstance that both his father, President John Adams, and President Thomas Jefferson died on the same day, only a few hours apart. Is there any evidence that these deaths changed or influenced this president? Did he get the message sent by the bankers? Was he compromised? My answer is yes. Then how? When John Quincy Adams served as Secretary of State, that would be under President Monroe, he was extremely aggressive against the European powers and their plan of colonizing in our hemisphere. He very strongly invoked the Monroe Doctrine. But as president, this all changed, and even in the extreme, and his administration focused largely on domestic, local advances. These actions, of course, greatly benefited the nation, but President John Quincy Adams' foreign policy was strangely bland and totally non-existent. I think he feared for his life and was compromised. And how could you blame him? These people get away with murdering presidents. The 4th president of the United States was James Madison. He was one of the founding fathers of the nation that had become president, and was also the only one of the first 5 presidents that was not assassinated. So if they assassinated Washington and Adams and Jefferson and Monroe, why did they kill Madison? Well, now, I think that you could almost guess. James Madison must have done something to please the international European banking cartel. Did he do something like that? Can you guess? Think about that for a moment. Madison was a very strong patriot and dearly loved our country. He did many things in his lifetime that made our freedom possible. However, while he was president, the British Army burned down the White House and invaded our country during the War of 1812. This war was fought on American soil. Madison had to flee for his very life from the flaming White House as Washington, the nation's capital, was burned by the British. At that time in history, I would say very few leaders fully comprehended or fully grasped the real significance of the banking control of money and credit. They knew about government, but they weren't bankers, and it took a lifetime of study to really understand the banking. When the bankers take over the control of the money and credit of the nation, they actually could conquer the nation. The bankers with long experience knew precisely how to do this. But even wise men like Thomas Jefferson, for them the details of this powerful money weapon must have remained in their minds still a deep mystery. But I think Jefferson had a clue, and I think he guessed right. He tells us,
I believe that banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. If the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their currency, first by inflation, then by deflation, the banks and corporations that will grow up around the banks will deprive the people of all property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. The issuing power should be taken from the banks and restored to the people, to whom it properly belongs. Thomas Jefferson.
there are so many of my friends who are buying guns. What a wonderful thing to do. I certainly support the Second Amendment, and I think in a government of the people, for the people, and by the people have to have the guns. But what I think they don't realize is that the control of the credit and money of the nation is more dangerous than gun control. And I'm against gun control. A fearful President James Madison gave the European banking cartel the second bank of the United States. This was a central bank of issue that was so dangerous that it could conquer our nation. Therefore, Madison was not targeted for assassination, and you might have guessed right. On the other hand, the first bank of the United States, Hamilton's Bank, was not a central bank of issue, even though some people will tell you it was. It wasn't. Money was not paper, and the bank's debts were not transferred to the people. The second bank of the United States was different. Later, President Jackson would run his campaign for re-election to the presidency with the slogan, "I killed the bank." It's a great thing. Anyway, they tried to assassinate Jackson, but by some miracle, 2 guns fired, but the bullets didn't come out. Then later, President John Tyler twice vetoed the recharter of this central second bank of the United States, and finished it off forever. However, his own party, under powerful foreign control and financial influence, forced President Tyler to retire from the presidency after only one term. The banking cartel assassinated President Tyler years later, when, as an influential ex-president and a Virginia member of the first Confederate legislature, he tried to stop and prevent the Civil War and to reunite the nation. Oh, I can imagine in my mind's eye, in my imagination, President Abraham Lincoln sitting down. He represents the North, and he's sitting down with the ex-president John Tyler, a member of the Confederate Congress he would have been, and a person from Virginia, from one of the southern states, and representing the South. I can see these two sitting down at a kitchen table and working out a solution that would prevent the Civil War, that would prevent secession of the southern states from the Union. This would have saved the lives of 500,000 Americans. But they both were assassinated. Of course, Vice President John Tyler had become president when President William Henry Harrison was assassinated by Skull and Bones, according to a deathbed confession. The videos in this series are usually devoted to the assassination of a single individual. Here, circumstances dictate that for the early days, I should show how the assassinations of Washington, Adams, Jefferson, and Monroe, and the compromise of Madison and John Quincy Adams, fits the pattern of later assassinations where the evidence is bolder and better reported and better preserved. Even with the 4 presidents that were shot, a person today can very simply, by reading an encyclopedia, discover that their deaths involved a plot of medical doctors. It is very obvious. These 4 early presidents were assassinated by medical doctors.
When a doctor does go wrong, he is the first of criminals. He has the nerve and he has the knowledge. Sherlock Holmes.
I use my observation, my intuition, and my opinion to create an editorial, a news editorial. It's my opinion. You're free to join in with my opinion or form your own opinion. The idea is just to get you thinking and maybe get your own opinion, and sometimes you agree with me and sometimes disagree with me. That's okay. I don't mind that at all, because it is my opinion. However, there is one point. This series is waking up people all over the world, they tell me. And what are they waking up about? Well, whenever a leader attempts to get rid of the sinister and evil banking cartel and make the world a happier place for all of us, whenever they try to do that, they are assassinated. So the reason why this series becomes important is because it indicates that we, the people, must demand debt-free money. We must support the presidents who are going to oppose this globalist agenda. The presidents and other leaders cannot do this for us. Don't wait for a leader. It's up to us to contact our representatives and tell them we want debt-free money.
Banking was conceived in iniquity, and was born in sin and evil. The bankers own the earth. Take it away from them, but leave them the power to create deposits. And with the flick of the pen, they will create enough deposits to buy it back again. However, take it away from them, and all the great fortunes like mine will disappear. And they ought to disappear. For it would be a happier and better world to live in. But, if you wish to remain the slaves of bankers, and pay the cost of your own slavery, let them continue to create deposits. said Sir Josiah Stamp, President of the Bank of England, in the 1920s. He was the second richest man in Britain.
Sherlock Holmes said, quote, "There is nothing new under the sun. It has all been done before." End quote.
Here, Sir Joshua Stamp, President of the Bank of London and second richest man in Britain in the 1920s, makes a statement we ought to examine very carefully. He makes the point that banking originated in deception, sin, and evil. Now that would fool the Founding Fathers. A pattern I observe that fits the strange deaths of U.S. presidents, popes, and other leaders. Also, this occurs anytime they try to correct a bad money or credit system. They are killed when money falls within their responsibility to govern. So Sir Joshua Stamp, the banking expert, tells us what? Well, he says the bankers own the world. The bankers control the world. It's not the people. It's not the government. No, it's the evil and sinister, inhumane bankers. Probably one person. One person, why one person? Well, Rothschild's will said that only the oldest son of the oldest son could get all of his wealth when he passed on. It all went to one person. It didn't go to distributed out to the family. It just went to one person. They end up controlling everything, utilizing low payment loans with a balloon payment. These loans are secretly made to leaders in key positions. If the agent obeys the bankers, then his loan payments are low, almost nothing. Maybe we could compare this kind of loan to a salary, or maybe a bribe. But if that leader tries to represent the people's best interest, he is destroyed with a very large, impossible-to-pay balloon payment that automatically comes due. The banks just refuse to refinance him, and down he goes. Many leaders find themselves in this position, but you never hear them talk about it. It must be hard to explain this. They find themselves hanging on the edge of a cliff, ready to fall, unless rescued by the bankers, who will only save them provided they sell out their country. Sir Stamp says the bankers' power comes from creating money out of nothing with deposits. A nation or its courts could take all their wealth away, he says, take it all away from them and destroy their monopoly. But if you allowed them to continue to control the money and the credit of the nation, they would soon buy it all back again. President Teddy Roosevelt, the trust buster, tried it once and found it didn't work. Roosevelt broke the monopoly. That's true. He was a trust buster. But the president missed what Stamp calls deposits. So then the bankers shot him when he tried to come back and do it again. Stamp agrees with me that the whole world would be a better and happier place if this credit power was not in the hands of the bankers, but instead in the hands of the people. The people need to intelligently demand debt-free money. That is a problem that if we all act together, we could easily fix. Now another thing Stamp says, and he implies it at least, that the consequence of you being ignorant of how the central bank of issue works and how when the central bank controls the money and credit of a nation, the people become trapped by an invisible empire. It is a hidden evil empire that buys up the press, buys up the courts, buys up the natural resources, the military, the religion, buys up the major corporations and industry, even buys up the government, buys up education. And thereby this evil enslaves the people, without them knowing the source of their danger. And Stamp states the people pay the cost of what? Their own slavery. And he should know.
Banks lend by creating credit. They create the means of payment out of nothing. Repeat, out of nothing, out of nothing, out of nothing, stated Ralph M. Hawtrey, Secretary of the British Treasury.
So what is debt-based money, and how does it work? For example, the U.S. Federal Reserve. The U.S. government prints the money and sells it to the privately owned business called a bank, the Federal Reserve Bank, at the cost of material and labor. That is about 4 cents a bill. A $1 bill costs 4 cents, and a $100 bill also costs 4 cents. Can you buy $100 bills for 4 cents each? Would you like to be able to buy $100 bills for 4 cents each? I bet you would. I would. So then the question is, are you equal to these secret manipulators, these secret money manipulators? We're supposed to be a nation of equality. Do we have equality when some people can buy $100 bills for 4 cents? And buy up all the government, buy up all the education, buy up all the natural resources, and buy up everything? No. And can you see why they would be an invisible empire? An invisible government within our own government? The Federal Reserve prints pieces of paper called Treasury bills, Treasury notes, and Treasury bonds. The bank sells these papers to China or Japan or also to certain parts of the public. These papers promise that when they mature, the buyer gets their money back plus a profit called interest. The Federal Reserve business sells these and puts the money in their own pocket. That is, into the pockets of the owners of this private banking business. It is a very large sum of money. Your government does not sell these investment instruments and does not get the money. The Federal Reserve, a private bank, a privately owned business, does this. Next, the U.S. Congress decides to pay for some projects the nation needs, and they ask the Federal Reserve Bank for the money. The bank gives the government back the money that the Fed had bought for 4 cents a bill. But this time the dollar bills are at full face value. $100, not 4 cents. The government intends to use this money to pay for its projects. Now that's not all. The bank tells the government it must also pay for the Treasury bills, Treasury bonds, and Treasury note that the bank sold to the Chinese and others. However, it is not the Chinese money the bank gives to the government, but the money that it bought for 4 cents a bill. And this ultimately gets dumped onto the national debt. And the politicians kick the problem on down the road for somebody else to deal with. If you had been listening carefully, you would have noted that the Federal Reserve Bank pocketed the money paid by the Chinese and the others and loaned the government the $100 bills at face value that they had bought from the government, that the government itself had printed, and then sold them for 4 cents each. The private bank also gave your government the banker's debt. It's debt paper. That is the Treasury bills, the Treasury notes, and the Treasury bonds that the bank owed to Chinese and others. This debt then was placed upon the people of the nation. This scam works as long as there is faith that the nation can and will pay its bills. Credit operates on faith that the bill will be paid by the borrower. This faith is a mysterious commodity that depends on public perception. So the debt-based monetary system is a bunco. It fools the public and the politicians. It's a criminal act by the crooks who never are prosecuted and are untouchable. And it's also something that takes, I guess, quite a bit of study to understand. On the other hand, what is debt-free money? What is debt-free money? On the other hand, what is debt-free money? The people need to intelligently demand debt-free money. So how does this work? The government prints the money and spends it. It does not borrow anything. Presidents Jackson, Polk, Lincoln, and Kennedy did this. There are no national debt hoax about borrowing money from a bank. This way, the government doesn't print money and give it away to a bank so it can borrow it back again. The government prints the money and spends it on the people. No bank involved or necessary. And this is also grounded in faith in the government. Now, these presidents were honorable men, but there's still a danger. The danger arises when there is too much power in too few hands. How does one fix this problem? The power associated with the control of volume of money in circulation needs to be placed into many hands. These hands need to represent the wide, diversified segments of the society. Put the control of the volume of money in circulation into the hands of all the people, not in the hands of the evil banking families. What is needed is called an open market committee. This committee controls the volume of money in circulation. It prevents the ravages of inflation, that means too much money, or the ravages of depression, that means not enough money. This committee needs to be made up of a large number of people. For example, 2 members from each of the 50 states of the Union. Or in the case of a smaller country, a number of members from each region. This avoids the danger of too much power in too few hands. Therefore, the control of the power of money and credit is no longer in the hands of the ruthless, inhumane, royal title, and insane family dynasties of Europe. This dangerous power would then rest in the many hands of the people, by way of their elected representatives, who in turn select members of an enlarged open market committee. This special committee controls the volume of money in circulation and the invisible and dynamic power associated with the nation's credit. The backing of paper money by gold and silver does not serve to replace the control of the volume of money in circulation function. This is because the volume of these commodities, that means gold and silver, the volume of these commodities in circulation can easily be controlled by those who are extremely wealthy and who have stockpiled gold and silver. Gold bugs or robber barons. A gold-backed currency has always played into the hands of this wealthy banking cartel. When you advocate the truth to people who are trapped in the mass media matrix, they will say that you are weird, or you are crazy, or you are a conspiracy theorist. So not to worry. Don't you worry. Don't worry at all. If people call you a conspiracy nut, or any kind of a nut, do you know why you don't have to worry about that? Because these same skeptics, when they hear the truth, and it has to be the truth, when they hear the truth from several different people, they change their mind. From several people, from different sources, a little bit different interpretation, they either just become silent, or they wake up, or maybe they just try to figure it out. It just takes several people telling the truth over and over again. That's why it's important for you to tell the truth, and to tell it to as many people as you can. And of course, you cannot do this alone. To convert a skeptic would take several people. We can all agree if it's the truth. So just keep in mind, when people think that you're a fool, and you're telling the truth, they will wake up when several other people tell them the same thing, because they have discovered it is the truth.
What one man can invent, another can discover. Sherlock Holmes.
As Sir Joshua Stamp advises, the world will be a better and happier place for all nations when the Luciferian bankers who call themselves Jews really become Jews, or are put into padded cells and straitjackets. People grow intelligent when they read the encyclopedia. You read the article, Central Bank of Issue, in the encyclopedia, and then you know as much as they do. As Sherlock Holmes told us, by reading this information, you discover what the banking cartel invented that makes us turn into slavery, and what they keep secret, or provide all kind of control of the press to keep us from finding out. They think Americans are dumb. That's a very big mistake that someday they're going to regret. Get out your encyclopedia, look up Central Bank of Issue.
A central bank, also called a reserve bank or monetary authority, is an institution that manages a state's currency, money supply, and interest rates. Central banks also usually oversee the commercial banking system of their respective countries. In contrast to a commercial bank, a central bank possesses a monopoly on increasing the monetary base in the state, and usually also prints the national currency, which usually serves as the state's legal tender. The primary function of a central bank is to control the nation's money supply and monetary policy, through active duties such as 1. Managing interest rates, 2. Setting the reserve requirement, and 3. Acting as a lender of last resort to the banking sector during times of bank insolvency or financial crisis. Central banks usually also have supervisory powers, intended to prevent bank runs and to reduce the risk that commercial banks and other financial institutions engage in reckless or fraudulent behavior. Central banks in most developed nations are institutionally designed to be independent from political interference. Still, limited control by the executive and legislative bodies usually exists. The U.S. Federal Reserve Bank acts in total secrecy and likely loans itself and its allies more money than it does to our government. Central banks create money out of nothing by issuing interest-free currency notes and selling them to the public, or to the government in exchange for interest-bearing assets such as treasury bills, treasury notes and treasury bonds. When a central bank wishes to purchase more bonds than their respective national governments make available, they may purchase private bonds or assets denominated in foreign currencies by foreign corporations and agencies.
Be sure and tell your friends to watch this series too. They can go to YouTube to the search bar, the little bar up on top. They can go up there and type in 9 U.S. presidents. Now don't use the number 9. Type in N-I-N-E for 9 U.S. presidents, and it'll come up. And you can even do this when you're just searching Google. At least a couple of my videos will show up when you just search Google. Just type in 9 U.S. presidents. Google is telling me now that almost 1 million people are viewing this video series. I wonder. I really wonder. And thanks for your comments and emails. And feel free to ask questions or make comments or whatever. See you next time.